this king too harshly because our culture is completely different than his. Because what he did is he invited all the poor people. He invited the good people and the bad people. Remember, that's who showed up, not the original people he invited. But basically, then he invited all the derelicts of the society, people who didn't even live in the town, people who at that point wouldn't have even had a relationship with the king in any way, shape, or form. He invited them to come. Okay? And then he kicked somebody out because they don't have proper attire. But again, if we know the customs of the time, according to Barnes' New Testament notes, quote, in ancient times, kings and princes were accustomed to make presents of changes of raiment to their friends and favorites. To refuse to receive this gift was an expression of highest contempt. So in other words, when you showed up at the wedding, they'd be like, here's your wedding clothes. Okay? Here's your clothes for the party. Go change. Okay? Because it was a time of celebration. So we give gifts now to the bride and groom, but in the ancient custom, if there was a royal wedding thrown, the king would give gifts to the guests, a new set of clothes. Okay? Specifically designed for this. So when you know the custom, you realize the king is supplying the guest with a valuable gift, and this guy refuses to wear what he had been given. Not only did he refuse to wear what had been given, he basically gets asked, why are you here without them? And he has nothing to say. He doesn't try to argue his way out. He's speechless. He's basically like, what's the big deal? What's your problem? See, the New Testament teaches us that we have to be wearing the right clothes to get into God's party. We need to be clothed with the righteousness of Jesus. When we place our faith in Christ, that's what we receive. God removes the old garments of sin, stained, dirty, ugly, and clothes you in righteous robes of Jesus. In Galatians 3:27, Paul says, for those of you who are baptized into Christ, that means immersed into Christ. It's not talking about physical baptism there, but spiritual baptism. Those of you who've been born again, we can say, have been clothed with Christ. I read an illustration in another sermon about this. Anybody ever heard of Ivan the Terrible? Okay. When he became Grand Duke of Russia, he proclaimed himself the Tsar, which of course is just another form of the word Caesar. And he actually claimed to be God on earth. Okay, that was what he tried to do. He later became known as Ivan the Terrible because he was cruel, he was vicious, he was horrible. He had his critics murdered, but also his family. He was one of the most brutal leaders in history. He had 7 wives, abused them all. He had thousands of Russians massacred. In a fit of rage, he once killed his oldest son, who was heir to the throne. He lived a wicked life, but just before he died, he requested his head be shaved and be ordained as a monk. Okay, and then he was buried in the clothes of a simple monk. And it was stated that he did this because he hoped that God wouldn't recognize him and he would slip into heaven under God's radar. And so he was buried as a monk. If that's the case, he should have been called Ivan the Stupid, okay? Because the only clothes acceptable to gain entrance into heaven is the righteousness of Christ. And the king supplies them as a gift. Anyone who refuses the king's offer, we see is thrown out. You know, it's not so much as being thrown out that should concern us as to where they're being thrown out to. Then the king told the attendants, tie him up hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You know, my notes here, it's interesting that Steve shows up today. Because in my notes here, I was going to share with you the story that Steve was having Jehovah's Witnesses come over to his house on a fairly regular basis. And they were opening up the scriptures together. And he invited me over one time to share in this. And it was really interesting. 2 things I still remember about that encounter was, number one, Steve took him to the passage in was Isaiah where he speaks that Stephen asked, what are they talking about here? They said Jesus, and his titles would be King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And they really, I don't know if you remember, they wanted to get past that real quick. Well, I know, but. And so finally, I just interjected. I asked him a question. I said, you don't believe in hell, right? I mean, am I correct? And they said, yes, we don't believe that there's a hell. I said, so what happens when you die? if we don't embrace what you teach. And he said, you just cease to exist. And I said, so, if you're right and I'm wrong, the worst that's going to happen to me is I cease to exist. I mean, it's kind of a sad thought, but, you know, who would remember me in 1,000 years anyway, right? I mean, and you just cease to exist. I said, but if I'm right and you're wrong, 1,000 years from now, you won't just not cease to exist, you'll still be in hell. Still, 10,000 years later. And he said, I know, but we don't believe in that. I said, I understand you don't believe in that. That's not my point. My point is one of us is wrong and one of us is right. We both can't be wrong and we both can't be right. If you're right, it's not really that big a deal to me in some way. It's really not. But if I'm right, you're taking that bigger risk was my point. And I don't know how often they came back after that, but this is the reality, folks. We don't like to think about it, but we all know people that are going to hell. It's a reality. So why would anyone refuse to wear the king's wedding clothes? Why would they do that? I think the answer is obvious. The man thought his clothes were good enough. You don't understand what the deal is. That's exactly the attitude of a lot of people. I'm good enough. I'm good enough. I'm good enough. But you can't crash God's party wearing your own clothes. You've got to come on his terms or not at all. Isaiah 64, 5 and 6 tells us that we've all become unclean. And all our righteous acts are like filthy rags. So you can wear your own filthy clothes of self-righteousness this morning, and you can accept the garment the king offers you. Isaiah 61:10 says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord. I exult in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation and wrapped me in a robe of righteousness. It's not just a New Testament thing, it's an Old Testament thing. It's a God thing. You can come just as you are to the wedding, but you can't stay that way. That's what he's saying. For many are invited, as we wrap up. For many are invited, but few are chosen. The message of this parable is really powerful, but really simple. God has given us an invitation to join him for eternity. He provides the clothing of the righteous Jesus. We accept his offer, and we enjoy the presence of the King of Kings for all eternity. As far as I know, when I look out on who's here this morning, everybody here has accepted that offer. But I always want to extend it because you just never know. You just never know. If you refuse God's offer of grace, doesn't matter how often you come to church, doesn't matter how often you read the Bible, doesn't matter how good you are, if you refuse God's offer of grace and enter in on your own clothes, you will be separated from him for eternity. There is no other option. We're not left with a third door to choose from. For the believer this morning, I want to close with this as we wrap up. God has given you an invitation, and you've accepted it. You've received it. But what are you doing to prepare for the wedding? What are you doing with this invitation? What are you going to do with it? What will you do? What good and legitimate reason would you have for not coming together when the church studies the Word, when we worship, when we pray? Look at, I don't know if I have my bulletin with me this morning. You got to, here we go. I got it. Okay. This week, through the Bible, Limerick Baptist Church, what good reason will you have for not reading the Scriptures? What good reason will you have for not praying over this Word? Wednesday, July 31st is the movie night. What good legitimate reason will you have for not being here? Wednesday, August 7th, August 14th, August 21st, when we find out that will wrap up this study in Ephesians, in the month of August, what good and legitimate reason will we have for rejecting God's invitation to be here with the saints? What did we do this week that showed our high regard, the privilege of gathering to worship the Lord and to be with his people? I think sometimes we forget the party starts here. The party is right now. The party is with God's people. And he's invited us. He leaves that choice, though. What to do with the invitation up to us. Why don't you stand? We will dismiss for the morning. Thank you for your attention and your time. Thank you for sacrificing to be here. Any word before we dismiss?